Abortion is not healthcare.
Let me play! Let me play!
So now that I've been persecuted by the woke mob, let's get to it. So as we look from this congregational document that was published in 1999 from the government publishing office, it says, but in fact, most feminists do not wish to acknowledge is that the early suffrage who are responsible for today's women's movement actually were astonishingly pro-life. Over a century ago, Susan B. Anthony tirelessly campaigned for the suffrage for women's employment rights and for the abolition of slavery. She voted illegally and took part in the Underground Railroads. And yes, Susan B. Anthony, mother of the feminist movement, opposed abortion. In the Revolution, the Radical Women's paper, which she published along with Elizabeth Cady, Anthony strongly editorialized against abortion. She referred to the bloody act as murder and infanticide and addressed its roots causes in women's oppression and in the abduction of family planning. She argues that the law pertaining abortion victimized women's planning. She argued that the law pertaining abortion victimized women while absolving men of all responsibility. And Susie B. Anthony was not alone in her thinking. Other early feminists also opposed abortion. For example, Elizabeth Cady Stanton proclaimed for a woman to treat her own body as a property. Suffragist Margaret Sanger, who was known as a very huge eugenicist and racist, now the founder of Planned Parenthood, she stated that abortion was a disowning of feminine values. The first female presidential candidate, Victoria Hall, was likewise strongly against abortion. She stated that every woman who knows if she were free, she would never bear an unwished for child, nor think of murdering one before its birth. If a lot of these early feminists were actually pro-life / anti-murder of their unborn child, why is it today that abortion is seen as this fantastic thing for women's freedom and women's right when these early feminists thought that it was actually oppressing women? Why is that? So this video perfectly uncovers why. This video is from a former writer of Cosmo. Her name is Sue Ellen Browder, and this is her experience.
I had married my husband in college, and right after college, we went to Los Angeles, and I worked for a newspaper out there. Almost immediately after I got this job, I ended up pregnant. See, I was very delighted with it. The newspaper was not so delighted with it, and at that time, you were fired for being pregnant. And they told me I could only work 5 months into my pregnancy, and then I had to quit. That did turn me into a feminist. Then I found out, of course, there were other things that women were being discriminated against in those days. Now, this was 1969. A married woman could not apply for credit in her own name. There were help wanted ads, help wanted male and help wanted female. Women couldn't go to law school or medical schools in many cases. So there was a lot of discrimination going on, and that is why so many women of my generation identified with the feminist movement. Betty Friedan, she and a number of women had gotten together and started the National Organization for Women. Again, they were fighting for equal opportunity for women in education and the workforce. It's very well documented that the abortion movement was originally a man's movement, an upper middle class white man's movement. But there was a man, and there were actually 2 men, who were fighting to get abortion legalized in America. These 2 men knew Betty Friedan very well. And they worked very hard to try to convince her to insert abortion in the women's movement's political Bill of Rights. The media were not in that room that night. That was a closed-door meeting. Then Betty Friedan, the next Monday, she has a press conference, and she tells them that she's speaking for all American women everywhere. And the Washington Post bought it. They headlined the abortion vote. They said essentially, all women want this. And that is how propaganda works. The feminists who bought into the abortion notion of my generation, well, think about it. They wanted to keep their jobs, but should women today, really in this climate, really have to choose between their job or their child? It's outrageous. Why was I pro-choice? Because I was going to be fired for being pregnant.
These women did not want to lose their job, and those two men were coercing her. You know, they were trying to convince Betty Friedan if she doesn't put that, then that bill might not get signed, because the whole thing was they wanted women to work because the government realized that half of the population was not getting taxed. And like, I made a whole video about the feminist movement and just how destructive it's been for generations. If you want to watch, it's going to be up here, I believe. Covered the dark and gritty side of the feminist movement. Abortion clinics profit from aborted babies. They sell that to companies and labs to experiment with your unborn child. And they even put it in our foods. And we eat aborted fetal cells for flavor enhancements. Aborted fetal cells used as food flavor enhancers. And these are the companies who are involved: PepsiCo, Kraft Foods, Campbell Soup, Nestle, and plenty more. And then those are the target. What they do not tell the public is that they are using HEK 293, the human embryonic kidney cells that are taken from a electively aborted baby to produce those receptors, stated Debbie Venage, executive director for the Children of God for Life, a pro-life watchdog group that has been monitoring the use of aborted fetal material in medical products and cosmetics for years. These are some of the companies. Once again, we have Sierra Mist, Ocean Spray, Mug Root Beer, Amp Energy Beverages, Aquafina flavored beverages, Lipton tea and other beverages, Fiesta, Gatorade, tropical juices, and we have gums, Trident, Stride, sour cherry gum, and just the list goes on of these companies just using all these fetal aborted cells. And yeah, somebody's gonna say, Mahmoud, isn't it illegal to do that? Well, technically, yes. It is very illegal, technically. So, here we go. Technically, it is against the law for any clinic to sell fetal remains for money. The NIH Revitalization Act of 1993 saw this. The act makes unlawful to knowingly acquire, receive, or other likewise transfer any human fetal tissue for value consideration if transfer affects interstate commerce. However, many abortion clinics are able to get around this law. In the paper Argument Against Fetal Tissue Trafficking, the author explains how clinics circumvent the law. The Research Institute and the abortion clinics have joined with a third party. The fetal tissue wholesaler pays the abortion clinic a site fee to place employees, third-party employees, known as procurement agents, who collect various body parts of aborted fetuses as soon as the abortion process is finished, and ships them to various research institutions by having free access to all the desirable fetal tissues. These agents take the body parts that are requested to various research laboratories and government agencies. So they're technically renting the space out to harvest the body parts rather than paying for the tissue itself. The abortionist then donates the tissues to the wholesaler. All the end transaction, the wholesaler will donate the fetal material to research, but bill them for the cost of retrieval. Thus, the business deal is complete. So these clinics are profiting from your aborted babies, and they're turning it into food enhancers or cosmetic beauty products. It was never about healthcare. It was never about your choice. It was about money, and it was about you getting taxed. That's really what it comes down to. Like, just woe unto those who call evil good and good evil. God bless. This is post editing me. What I realized also too is that there are places in the world and there are places in the country that people can even have abortions up to 8 months. Like, think about how messed up that actually is. I mean, that is a practical child already. It's like fully developed and pretty much ready to be born. Which is just completely and utterly disgusting. But we can also go in the whole depopulation agenda as well. But that's a video for a different time though.